And I'm going to record this space as well. Where are you? Go to the cloud. All right, good luck. Thank you very much.
Okay, Jeno, let's start. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome you to our space. We are excited to have Jeno Mugisha Muntu with us to go through different conversations with us, conversations to do with national issues of national importance, but also issues to do with regional progress also, that is for the East African community. Jeno, hello, can you hear me, sir? Okay, so Jeno, let's start with simple pleasantries. How are you, sir? How have you been? How's the month been for you?
I'm doing well. Month has been tough. A number of incidents which have happened. It's kind of wasn't such a good month, but that's how life is. We keep moving.
Okay, we are sorry about that, about those that didn't go well. Yeah, so General, I think we'll just delve into our conversation since almost our time is fast spent. We are 5 minutes into our conversation this afternoon. We will have a conversation around things to do with Uganda. Those are national issues, things to do with what has happened, what has transpired through the last 1 month. And then from there, we'll go and talk about an election that happened in the neighboring, in our neighborhood that has a lot of bearing, a lot of importance to not only Uganda, but also the East African community. And then we'll talk about the move that ANT is choosing to take in terms of organizing as a political party. But let's start with our nation. General, I have seen a number of your tweets in regards to the activities that is being taken on by the government of Uganda. That's in regards to, one, the Uganda Airlines. I think we all know that the Uganda Airlines has had we've had a series of probes into the airline, and that's in regards to its corporate leadership, or those that are at the helm of this particular entity that is a government entity. But also we've had a number of reports by the Auditor General in which there have been allegations of mismanagement in regards to wages, the fact that there's no clear number of people that the Uganda Airlines employs, but also in regards to the fact that there's no clear wage structure, the fact that it has had a number of losses for the first 2 years. We've had a number of series of conversations around that, but also we've had a number of conversations around the Isimba Dam, and that's in regards to the fact that I think it's shut down. In the last monitor, there was a conversation around how all the problems around the Isimba Dam are down to the inadequacies of the human errors. So it goes back to how things are being done. Jenna, my question is simple to you really this evening. How do you believe that the current government has it in them to invest national resources in ways that can lead to the development of this nation? Because all these entities that we've talked about are financed from taxpayers' money. So do you believe that the current state can lead to some kind of investment that is meaningful for this nation? Jeno, you're muted.
Has no capacity to manage national resources in a disciplined way. I think that is one of the biggest weaknesses they have. Fortunately, it's a weakness which is so self-evident that even those who are within the regime have acknowledged that. You look at a project like Isimba Dam. This is a project worth about United States dollars 520 something million. One, it looked like the company which was given the construction of Isimba Dam had also put in a bid for Karuma. And apparently, if the story is correct that I read, when this company that had bid for Karuma lost out on the Karuma bid, that appeased them. So they just gave them Isimba Dam. These are two totally different dams. I don't see how you can do that. They needed to have conducted the bidding process, because $520 something million is a lot of money. Two, supervision seems to have been so weak. The report I read, where they are talking about corrective actions that need to be done underwater, apparently the type of cement that was used, the type of reinforcements that were done. They have noticed, it seems, weaknesses in the infrastructure, which needs, looks urgent corrective actions. Two, it seems that the period for when the dam is meant to be under the contractors is about to end. That looks like from the report that I saw. It could be ending by this end of this year. So if they don't have a disciplined group of negotiators on the government side to hold this company responsible for the corrective actions to be done, we will have another problem here, so that next time the corrective action that are supposed to be done, we may be required to pay for them. I don't know whether the ministry is concerned are paying attention. This is a dam which is hardly 5 years old, and you can see it has been shut down. And the ministry has to wake up, and more so the parliament. I don't know whether parliament will have the guts, because in the past on issues of that nature, they have lacked the backbone to do their duty of oversight and exert all the necessary pressure on the regime. We have not seen heads roll for anything, any of those errors of omission or commission. We have not seen anything happen in regard to that. And that tends to be the character of this regime. That's on the Isimba Dam. On airlines, by the time they decided to revive airlines, they really need to have done adequate preparations. Airline business is a very, very sensitive business. You can see that even in Europe, even in the United States of America, all over the African continent, there are many airline businesses that really struggle, and some even go under. But we have also seen examples where airlines are run efficiently. We have seen an example close by Ethiopia, where even when there have been challenges within governance, they have gone through military regimes, they have gone through internal strife, but Ethiopian airline has been run professionally. And that's the most critical thing. The moment you want to run an airline, it must be run professionally. Even when you are injecting government resources, if you don't have people who are well-trained, who have got knowledge of that industry, I wouldn't mind myself if we don't have people who are ready yet to have contracted expertise from outside. There are many countries in Africa that have got expertise. You can even get an expert from anywhere else in the world, as long as they are going to run the airline professionally, so that it takes, builds a firm foundation in terms of being managed as a business, and then you can grow it from there from. But right from the beginning, you have seen that the same indiscipline that affects the running of other government departments is the same indiscipline and ineptness that is applied in running an airline business. I doubt whether this regime is going to sustain, it's going to become a sinkhole until perhaps at a point when there is a more disciplined group that can go in and put in rectification measures. Right now, it will be miraculous if even this group that they are putting in is able to turn it around from being a loss-making venture to become stable. I highly doubt. The management practices here is the cause of all this. Just go, headhunting is acceptable. Headhunting is acceptable. You can headhunt and get someone whom you know is going to run a business. But even when you're headhunting, it needs to be done in a systematic way. But the manner I saw the interviews that were being done, you can see that there's a lot of coordination between the ministry concerned, the board, the executive, the chief executive. The whole thing is so haphazard. And it's not only is it frightening, it can also be quite, anger generating to see national resources being wasted in such a way, and you don't see any meaningful interventions in terms of carrying out punishments against those who would have committed such, grave errors in terms of resource allocations, in terms of resource utilization. But it's frustrating basically all around. And until we resolve the issue of governance, all this is going to continue happening.
General, just a follow-up on the question to do with the airlines, because there are a number of articles that suggest that most of the national carriers, national airlines struggle in terms of making profit. I think in our neighborhood in Kenya, the national carrier, I think, is trying to change how it operates in a way. And other arguments have been made that the airline or this business has really struggled because of the COVID pandemic, and so they're trying to pick themselves up. Did you think, in a way, that absolves our current leadership, and together with the corporate management of the Uganda Airlines, didn't it absolve them of any form of responsibility on the fact that there's a continued failure from them to make any money from such a very big venture?
So I'm going to go for
that it caused a negative impact on the business of tourism, for example. But even before COVID, there are, I think, 3 or 4 attempts to try to revive a career here in Uganda, and all of them failed. Kenya Airline itself has had quite a number of problems in the past. Every time airline is not doing well, most times you look at management. Mismanagement is always the source of whatever happens, in terms of either they have lost focus or maybe applied a wrong strategy. At times you'll find that they are not managing costs very well, costs of fuel. At times it would be like in Uganda procurement process. Why on earth would anybody invest in bombardiers which are being phased out? How on earth, honestly, could any government, any government where they were responsible, public-minded, if they were responsible public-minded officials, invest in buying aircraft? You will hear an argument from many professionals who run airlines or who have experience in airline business that it would be better to lease aircraft. So even if they were to buy aircraft, they would need to have built aircraft which are going to be in production for many years to come. Bombardier is winding up. And then they went and bought Bombardiers from that company, which is winding up. Either it is corruption, and people had a cut to take out of the payments which would be made, or it is a criminal irresponsibility. I can't see it any other way. We've also seen airlines which succeed. You see airlines like Ethiopian Airlines, you see airlines like Emirates, you see Singapore Airlines, you see I think the one from Doha, the one which is based in Doha, Qatar Airlines, and all these are really public funded. They are all actually, the government has investments in all those that we've mentioned, but they are run professionally. That's the difference. When you focus, you find that they are run professionally. It wouldn't matter even if they weren't making huge profits, because at times the airlines may not necessarily serve as profit-making bodies. At times they can work in terms of giving support in other areas of investments, like in tourism, to act as it's tourism. I mean, airlines is like building a road infrastructure. You know, for transportation, if you have got exports like flowers, exports like vegetables, and then also bring in tourists. If you are building a tourist industry and you are getting good profits from tourism, at times you can run an airline basically for that. But at least it needs to be to break even. You don't make losses, and then you keep on pumping money. If it is a sinkhole, you would have to look for other measures to do that. And in East Africa, the 7 countries need to put their heads together and look at how do they develop tourism so that East Africa becomes a common destination, and that is coordinated in terms of the 7 countries. For example, having one common visa. 2, to look at possibilities of having one hub or 2, and then running a common airline. They need to look at that. East African Airways was doing quite well, but they would have to overcome their egos, they would have to overcome their pettiness, they would have to look at it as a business. I hope that there are countries that have got people with that kind of discipline and that kind of really care, because tourism is a low-hanging fruit. All these countries like Tanzania, like Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Congo, you know, all those have got huge potential for tourism. So we'll just wait and see. Yes, Emmanuel.
Yeah, General, the other question, and it's just a follow-up on this particular conversation still as we wound up. You seem to show that there's a lot of indiscipline, one, but also I think our problems start from the beginning, really. It's not that from the onset, when we're starting out these ventures, we have a lot of foul play, that is in terms of appointments, in terms of even the intentions of why we do these things, really, because I think you tried to make that argument in there that from the onset, these ventures are done in a way that will not lead to any form of success. So my question is, because you also suggest that the current team cannot lead to any form of meaningful development in a way. So my question is, are we hopeless? Is there any form of are there things that we can do as citizens for us to have some kind of redemption, for us to redeem some of the investments that our country has put into these very many ventures that seem not to yield any form of profit or any form of future promise for us as a nation? Are there any things that citizens or as different entities we can do to help us try to achieve something from even these things that have been mismanaged by this current regime? Or how do we save this, or how do we arrest this particular bad situation?
One option is for the members and leaders within NRM who look at all this rot and are incensed by it, if they have a capacity to coordinate effort and carry out an aggressive effort within the NRM to become the dominant force and therefore recover their party and therefore be able to do things in a disciplined way, that would be one option. The reformists, or those who claim to be reformists within NRM, to conduct an aggressive fight within NRM to take it over. That would be one option if they succeeded. I have my own doubts about that, but still it's an open option. The other option that remains in the event that nothing of that nature succeeds in regard to NRM is the regime change. And then hopefully when the regime changes, But the next group would be composed of disciplined people who also have the skills of managing power and also skills of how to put in place the necessary efforts of re-strengthening institutions, establishing systems of governance that can create an environment in which professionals in different fields can conduct businesses professionally, people in the private sector to be able to conduct their own businesses, and to find an environment even where governments are run efficiently with discipline. That's the only other option that I notice. The third option is things to remain the way they are, and we continue complaining and we continue deteriorating and until there's an implosion at some point. A worse situation that we see. I don't see any other, third option, really.
General, for that conversation around the corporate habits and the way forward, really, because I think sometimes we wallow in a lot of pity, like we feel sorry for ourselves. But I think what you're trying to say is that it starts with us, really. I think we need to take over and have some kind of move that helps us to take over the decision making of our nation. I hope I got you well. I think throughout all those three means that you gave, there's a conversation around how I think as people within the decisions we make, political decisions that we make, we need to be very deliberate about those that we choose. And I'll end with this really at the end, because on this particular topic, because we've had Parliament either through committees or through the flow of Parliament trying to call upon the state when things are not going right, and we've not really had any form of result from that. The airline conversation is going on right now, but we've had a number of commissions, we've had a number of committee meetings and reports that have really been made up about these particular things. You can have a number of conversations around really things, from Temangalo to a number of things really, and some have had courts come through and have some good pronouncements on them. But my question is about the oversight role of Parliament. How have we reached a place where Parliament itself cannot rein in on the state or on the cabinet when they choose to be indisciplined in regards to how they run government business? How have we reached here, and how then also do we salvage that state in terms of how do we have a Parliament that speaks a language that is beneficial to all of us as individuals in regards to state-owned enterprises?
Because one, the political elite, those who are involved in politics right now, because if you look at the members of Parliament, it doesn't matter even if you, because the movement has gotten the majority in Parliament, 300 plus members of Parliament, but it doesn't matter even if you are a member of the ruling party. As long as you are someone who believes that national resources should be put to the use of extending services the people you represent, you put your foot down, you don't care. You fight anybody who's corrupt, whether they are within your own party or outside of your own party. That's where it would need to start from. Unfortunately, the levels of political consciousness also seem to be low across the board in our country, even people who are not necessarily involved in politics. Because I cannot understand how people who pay taxes, and everybody pays taxes, can see the level of hemorrhage, the levels of rot, and the people simply remain complacent, or that hope that something good is going to happen, but without putting in effort in supporting those who are fighting against things of that nature, or those who want to bring change, those who want to cause reforms, those within the ruling party, and also those outside. So it's a deep problem within our society, and one hopes that as we continue discussing these issues, that there are going to be more and more people who will reach a point and say enough is enough, so that we can turn it around, because it has become a culture. I also know that those who are in the regime, There are those who want things to remain the way they are. Why? Because they depend on rented support. I know for sure, like the key actors within the government, within the regime, know that as long as there are open channels through which people can be corrupt, through which people can amass wealth the wrong ways, but also remain loyal to the group that is in power, they have no problem at all. They don't want to rock the boat. So they benefit from that in that regard. But how many people are benefiting from corruption? It can't even be 1% of the population. So the question is what the rest are thinking, and also the less than 1% that is benefiting. Why on earth they don't understand that if they don't start doing things the right way, and when there is an implosion, I mean, we have seen people who have amassed wealth in the past, and it came to nothing when changes happen. And I just bump into so many people who are walking on the streets, some of them literally, but who really were loaded because of having had access to free money. So it's a challenge. We should not be frustrated by that. Those who want to see qualitative change need to keep on organizing under whatever circumstances. Keep on organizing, because change is a constant. Change will happen. But at the point of change, one hopes that we'll have a team of people, Ugandans, not necessarily in politics, but across all walks of life, that can coalesce around change that is meaningful change, that is qualitative change, where things can be done in professional ways, in disciplined ways, that national resources can be used to extend services to the people, to the taxpayer. That's where we all need to be focused.
Thank you very much, General, on that. You were talking about the idea of change, because I think we are all optimistic about change, because change is really is a must, and it's inevitable at one time to happen. Our second topic is about some kind of transition. I think there's been a debate on where there's a transition in the army, and that's because of a number of things that have happened in there. I think I saw a tweet recently of someone saying that we are having a transition and we are sleeping on that transition. The transition is going on within the state, and most of us do not understand that it's going on. And that was after the retirement of a number of high-ranking officers. I think we had 2 generals in there that retired, and both of them are historicals, really. And then I think a week before that, we had in the same week, I think we had one of the historicals also lose their lives or go to rest. So first of all, my first question is there a transition happening in the army? Because that has been suggested that we're having a transition because one, the old guard is being done with, quote unquote, they're moving on. But then also we're having a number of young officers and young, that's the age of in their 40s or around there, taking up a number of positions in the army at the moment. So is there a transition that we are seeing? That's the first question. The second question is, if you to look back, and I'm saying this because you said a number of things about General Eli Tumwine earlier upon his death. So the question is, when you look back at the time when you and the other 27 and other people went to the bush, do you think the NRA has met the aspirations that you guys had when you went to the bush, the aspirations of a professional military outfit, an outfit that represents the people's needs? So do you think you met that? One, is there a transition? Two, do you think the NRA and now the UPDF as is right now, has it achieved anything? Has it achieved the intended dreams that you had and aspirations that you had when you left university to go into the bush?
Well, I don't know who was talking about transition happening and we are not seeing, but whoever it was, it seems like we don't have a common understanding of what transition is. I think he must be confusing retirements. Retirements happen all the time. Here in Uganda, during the UA, there are those who are retiring. Okay, UNRA, they want that many because there was war. All the 5 years of UNRA, all the 7 years of UNRA's existence. Of course, naturally with the UPDF, which emerged from NRA had been in place for about 35 years or so. Naturally, there would be retirements of one generation and a new generation coming in. But transition, the way I understand transition, is transitioning from one culture to another. Management, governance, on issues of governance. At two levels. One, to see one government taking over from another. Actually, I look at transition in two ways. One, the physical replacement of one government by another, in terms of one having the president, for example, handing over to another president, different, not one president winning an election and continue to be the president, and you think that that is a transition. That is not. We have seen like in Ghana, and Ghana has had two types which are unique. One, that they have had different presidents coming in, taking over peacefully. We have also seen an opposition party taking over after having won an election, and the margins were quite small. Actually, there was a margin of, it was even less than Kenya, because in Ghana it was between 50 to 60,000. And Mahama, who had been in power, had served for only one term. So the current president won an election on leading an opposition party. The sitting president had run for one term. He was running for his second term. He was beaten, and they ceded power. So a party got out of power, a new party got into power. We have seen transitions in Kenya where we had Kibaki get in for 10 years. He got out. Uhuru Kenyatta has been for 10 years. He has now moved out, and the president-elect Ruto is coming in a peaceful way. That's a transition. But to me, there's also another transition. Even when you have changes of government, individual presidents taking over from others in a peaceful way, parties competing for power, and the one which wins takes over and another party gets out. That's also a good transition if it's done peacefully. But to me, there's also another critical transition. When you have a history of a country that is being marred in negative politics, in corruption, and you find that it has reached a level where it's almost established as a culture, where there is corruption, where there is nepotism, where there are injustices. And then when a new party takes over, it turns the direction of politics in the country, it turns the direction of economic management in a country, and it starts building a new culture. That's also a transition. The other gentleman was talking about the transition of a new generation coming. Another one, I mean, we've had countries where they have had one army since independence. For the last 50 years, 60 years, they have had one army. And they have had so many officers retire, so many generations leave, new generations come in, but they remain corrupt. Those countries remain corrupt. So we differ in terms of how we look at transition. Two, on whether UPDF is also been undergoing, yes.
Just to cut you short about your understanding of transition, don't you think that new faces come with a new drive and a new form of culture? Because I feel like you are judging the new generation, because perhaps say there's a new generation in the army that's coming up. You are judging them before they entirely take over the reins of the army. So don't you think that maybe the person who said that was being optimistic, that with the new faces and the disappearance of the old faces, that means that we'll have maybe a new culture within the army, a new culture, and also because of the nature of our country where the army in a way informs a lot of our decisions, that then with those new faces and the presumed new culture that will come with a new thought process, then they'll have some kind of impact on governance and impact on a number of things within the state.
Even the new group that comes in is going to be judged by its own actions. For example, when there is conduct of an election, how are they going to act? Are they going to act professional and remain outside of elections? Are they going to participate in suppressing the efforts of those who are in the opposition, like has happened in the past? Would they remain partisan? Or would they, for example, internally carry out measures to stand and firmly and tell the regime that this is a no-go area? Yes, we are officers, we are under command, but this is unprofessional. I am not making judgment. The officers in charge are the ones who are going to prove which direction they are going to be moving. So all of us are watching. Of course, they will be watching, we'll be watching. And at a point, if they change the culture from what has been existing so far into a new direction, we are ready to applaud. There's no doubt about that. That's what we desire. And we have already informed them that we'll give them all the necessary backup in terms of if they stand their ground. And I mean, we've seen some countries like in Kenya, the management of the transition between Moi and Kibaki. The army took a keen interest and participated in a very, very fundamental way, but not in the open, professionally behind the scenes. And a lot of advice that they were giving, professional advice, and went out of the way even to influence Moi to retire, even when there were attempts to force a candidate whom he wanted to come in. And the army told him, no, don't go in that direction. And they had a smooth transition. So yes, I mean, measures like that cannot be lost onto the country or the rest of us. We would know. There's nothing that can happen in this country and we wouldn't be able to know. So, you know, we will wait. We'll give them the benefit of doubt. New faces, yes, there are also instances where there are many changes. There have been so many changes in this African continent. In a number of countries where new faces come in, and they replace faces that would have been there maybe for 5-10 years, and new faces come in again. There are countries where they have had so many changes, but the country keeps moving in the same direction, in a wrong direction of corruption, of mismanagement. So we'll keep watching whichever direction we are going to take as a country. If there are people, political actors, military actors who take the correct direction, the country will applaud. I have no doubt about that. But if there are new faces and they keep moving in the wrong direction, there's no way. Judgment will have to be, you know, given.
So,
General,
yes. So the second question was about whether you feel like the UPDF, which was from the NRA when it was starting out, whether you think it has met your aspirations as the young group of men that went to the bush. Do you think that when you look at this outfit at the moment, when you look at this army that is called the professional army, the Uganda People's Defense Force, when you look at it, do you think it meets what you aspired for at the time when you went to the bush?
They have not performed as according to what would have been desired. But to me, it is not something strange because I know the history. Right from the bush, there were two tendencies in the forces, as there were two tendencies in the politics. There are those who looked at the acquisition of power as an end in itself. There are those who looked at power as a means of how to build the foundation for good governance, to have equality before the law, to have equal opportunities, to have transparent systems of transparent management of national resources, to have systems in which taxpayers' money would be utilized to the benefit of the taxpayer, the benefit of the citizens, to have democratic practices, to have a culture of justice. So there's always been contention since independence, even through different regimes. So this regime is not different. So the question is the balance of forces. Right now, the balance of forces is in favor of those who look at power as an end in itself. And the army is caught up in that because the army doesn't have a significant number of political actors who are bold, who are firm, because the army can't speak out in issues of this nature. I know, I've been in the army. There are many times I cannot even judge them because I know the environment when you are under command. But also know that the political actors, and I think there's a big weakness, like the political actors in the movement, if there are those who are bold, who are the backbone, they're the ones who would be pushing. And the army would get allies of those who want the army to be fully professionalized. But if they see the army being sucked into the electoral processes, and they all think it is to their advantage because they're going to end up in power, what do you get? You get a problem. The army is there. I know in their minds, there are many who would want to see things done different. But also know in the manner in how the army operates, that it is not that easy for them. So it is going to remain a contentious area. The army is going to remain a contentious area until a time when there are political actors who are able to take power and who understand that an environment must be created where the army, while it is political, that it is not partisan, and to create space for them to fully professionalize, and therefore start building a culture where the army would respect the aspirations of people through the conduct of elections without involving the army in electoral processes. Before that happens, there will remain contention. And many officers and men will remain in the army, trying to be professional and being abused, doing the wrong things that they don't believe in. And many of them will just cut out that role, because at the end of the day, many would want to maintain their command positions and access resources, take care of their families and all that. At times, one can understand that. Not everybody is cut out to be bored, morally bored. Many, maybe 90-something% of the officers and men in UPDF are bored. They are courageous in terms of battlefield operations. They will not run, away from battles. They'll fight day and night. Many will die. Others will continue fighting. I know that of UPDF. But also, when it comes to moral courage, there are quite many who still lack that. But that's a national question. Until there's a team of leaders who knows what that means and start building a new culture where people can be built to become strong morally, to say, I will stand by right, even if I'm going to lose a job, even if I am going to be misunderstood. That requires leaders who are able to build other leaders in politics as well as in the institutions of governance, to build that character in them. Right now, it is an area of high deficit in the politics as well. That's why you find members of parliament, even who know what is wrong, but they can't stand up and say, this is wrong. Why? Because they want to survive. Survival is, the culture of survival is the biggest weakness that I notice in our country and many African countries.
Jenna, I have a simple follow-up from your discussion, really. Because one, you say two things that really stood out for me that I want us to just interrogate a little bit. The first thing you said was the fact that that the army cannot speak. You try to allude to that. But from the eyes of a common man, we think the army has spoken a number of times. Has spoken through its leaders. If you remember, in the last election, I think was it a regional commander in Masaka who said that the army will not be willing to give away power just like that, I think in Masaka. Then we've had a number of comments being made by the people in the army, really, that show the partisan nature of their partisan nature and where they lie or think about these things. So one, they've spoken, but also secondly, they speak to the actions they do. And
But speaking in support of where you think the regime is, I mean, anybody can speak. I mean, if you know that that's what the regime requires and you speak, what risk is in that? There's nothing risky when you say things that are supportive of the regime orientation or the regime desires. That's why an officer like the one in Masaka could survive after that, but in a professional army, he wouldn't. So what I'm trying to say, those would be able to come out and say, no, I mean, there are also those who have spoken, because we have had many people who've been put on trial, like General Tinyefuza, General Tumukunde, which is also understandable because the army operates different from how all other institutions operate. When you break ranks and you speak out in the open, something which is contravenes army regulations, they will lean on you, they will suppress you. But see, when a culture is built and it is strong and it is within the command levels, you don't even have to speak publicly. They will enforce things which the army thinks need to be done. I mean, like I've told you an example of what happened in Kenya during the Moi to Kibaki transition. It never came out in the open. Nobody spoke in the open, but they would go in confidence and brief the late President Moi. Organized a send-off parade, I think in 7th Battalion, Langata, there is a unit there, and he went and inspected the guard of honor as a send-off. And they wanted, it was deliberate, it was send a signal that there's going to be a retirement, that there's going to be a new president, that there's going to be a transition. They didn't have to speak. You know, when you're an individual and you break ranks and you speak out there in the open, yes, it has got its own consequences. There are those who are bold enough to take that route. Not everybody is cut out for that. But what I'm looking at is where you have many who believe that, you know what, the army needs to be run in a professional way. And that culture becomes the dominant culture in the army. They will stand firm and they can push for reforms, and reforms will be conducted. It has happened in some African countries, not in all. So we keep watching to see what happens here, but there's going to be, excuse me, there also need to be a conscious effort from outside the army, you know, for those who are involved in politics, those in the regime, those outside the regime, to recognize that and keep speaking, because those who are in the politics have got platforms. They've got the platform in parliament, they've got platform on radios, on TVs, all over. To keep building, to keep pushing, to keep applying effort until change happens. The desired change happens. Not only in terms of regime change, but also in terms of the change of culture. Because it doesn't make sense even when the next group goes in and starts doing the same thing.
Yeah, so General, just to follow up, and I think as we try to round up that particular conversation, there's a question around, you spoke about Tumukunde and General Tinyefuza, really, and I think both of them at the moment receive a lot of credit from the general populace, really. When you speak about the two, you have a lot of, you have a feel of people tend to be very welcoming of both. And yet, if you have to talk about a number of people within the current army structure or within those that work with the state, even those that maybe retired from them but still work with the state, there's a general feeling of apathy and hatred towards them. I think you can. I think you read a number of tweets about the late General Eli Chimuine when he died. There are quite a number of contrasting views about him. People that were close to him give him a lot of credence. They really speak of him in a very light way. And yet, those that have watched him from the gallery from a distance, that have seen his actions and his words, feel a feeling of hatred towards him. My question to you, General, is that do you have to leave the army for you to have such, do you have to leave service for you to have such kind of welcome from people? And how do we reach at a place where those that are supposed to be those that are supposed to be protecting us are hated by those that they protect themselves? So how did the army reach at a place where that when they arrived in 1984, there was a general welcome for them and applause as they entered the city of Kampala, but now there's a general hatred for them, and that the only kind of refuge they can receive or love they can receive is if they distance themselves from their own structure that they created themselves.
New, if you look at our history, but unfortunately many Ugandans now are young, they are below 35, so they have never had experiences of what happened in the past. I don't know of any regime that has ever coming, and it was not, there were no jubilations on the streets of Kampala. I also don't know of any regime which has been ousted without there being, jubilations again. And by the time most of the regimes fall, you find that the levels of hatred would be so deep within the country, or at least in parts of the country. 71, when Amin took over, the people were celebrating all over Kampala. By the time Amin's government fell in 79, people were really so angry with the Amin regime. Same thing happened in 81. I mean, it was 80 when Obote took over. Okay, there was celebration in some parts of the country. There was anger in other parts of the country. 85, when Rutua overthrew Obote, there were celebrations in many parts, in a number of parts of the country, anger in others. When we took power, there were celebrations in parts of the country. There was anger in others. Two, you look at when 71, because people may lose sight of this, we have not broken out of a vicious cycle. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to break out of that vicious cycle. But history shows us that in 71, when Obote was overthrown, because human beings are emotional beings, the levels of political consciousness are still low. So people tend to associate leaders with the areas they come from. Even when you find in some of the areas where they come from, that there would have been resistance, against them. Like in 71, the Langis and Achoris, unfortunately, paid a heavy price because many people in the rest of the country were looking at them as if they are the ones who had been oppressing them. And many people who suffered. And I can tell you, there are many people always who are innocent, but because of association, they pay a price. 79, when Amin was overthrown, people from West Nile, more so from Koboko and from Arua, Yumbe, because they were associated with Amin's rule, many of the officers and many politicians were from West Nile. They paid a heavy price, even when there had been resistance, active resistance against Amin from West Nile itself, because like the late Charles Salube, who was trying to pull off a coup, was from West Nile. And a number of other people, officers who were killed from West Nile. But people forget all that. Second time, when Obote was overthrown, people from Lango also, there was a lot of conflict, internal conflict in that area, and a number of people paid the price. 86, same thing. There are people who thought that Rutua and Basilio, because they were the leaders at that time, that the problems that were faced by the country were because of Acholis. But before we reach that, during Obote, 80 when he took power, there had been resistance from the north. People have forgotten people like the Tiberio or Thomas. They have forgotten, like there used to be an officer who was in Moroto. I forget the name. Was it Obama? I think Lieutenant Kano. There had been resistance even from the north at that time. But many times people don't see that. They look at the person at the top. And more so when the regime which they lead has committed atrocities, has trampled on human rights, has engaged in things which the population doesn't like. That happens. Right now, if you put your ear on the ground, you'll have a feeling that the people in the West, there's a lot of frustration and anger against people from the West. And then it is narrowed down further to the people from Ankore. And then at times it's narrowed down further, not beyond people of Ankore, to the people of Nyabshozi. So it's a trend. And until we get a regime composed of men and women of integrity, men and women of character from across different ethnic groups, across different religious groups, because in the past we've also had a problem with religion. Now we don't have that. It is not in the mix. But in 71, many Muslims paid a heavy price because they thought that they were the a foundation for Amin's rule. And then there were many, there were also a number who were opposed to him. So in that mix, people can suffer. So until we get a team of leaders who are able to build a new foundation and a new culture where there's justice, where there's fairness, where there is equality before the law, where there are transparent institutions that can utilize national resources in transparent ways, where there is accountability. Until that happens, I have the feeling that there's going to be a repeat of what we've seen in the past in the form of it being part of a vicious cycle. We've not broken out of it yet. So I do understand. I know where people are coming from. Now, the only difference I notice right now, maybe because it's taken a longer time, there are many significant actors in the resistance against the regime who come from the West. And I think to some extent, and also from Buganda. Buganda, it is only until recent when Buganda shifted and went under NUP. But before Buganda went under NUP, you need to recognize that there was a lot of frustration and anger in the North about the Buganda Western Belt, because they saw them as the foundation for General Museveni's rule. And they were at the receiving end in terms of negative practices, discrimination, injustices. Now there's a shift that NUP is in Uganda. There's now a shift. It is no longer like it used to be before. Now the focus is on the West. And therefore, when people react the way they do, for me, I fully understand. Is it correct? I don't think it is correct. However, we need to do things in a way that will eventually break us out as a country, as a people, from that vicious cycle. So that in the future, once a regime is doing things the right way, there won't be any reason why people would be angry or frustrated about it. Two, when there are mechanisms of ousting a regime through a clear electoral process, you won't get that kind of frustration where it can turn physical. They will vote out a regime, but we've not reached that point yet. So we need to recognize those dynamics. I do recognize the dynamics myself. And also to encourage people more so who come from areas where presidents come from. They need to be more active in ensuring that wrong rule is resisted, so that they are not emotionally wrapped into believing that they are like the common saying that Bali Muchintu. I think it's a word they use a lot in Uganda, in Uganda, which is deceptive, because when you look during Obote's time in Lango, the levels of poverty were as rampant as you could find in other parts of the country. When Amin was in power, the people of West Nile were not any richer. The people who always benefit from leaders who come from particular areas are the elite. The peasants, who are the majority, their livelihoods are almost the same as the livelihoods of other peasants from other areas. But this is something which is lost on many people. However, the elite in areas where the presidents come from, they need to be more active. Like right now, my feeling is that the people from the West, the people from Ankole, should be more aggressive in standing boldly to ensure that the termination of this regime happens in as fast as is possible. They should work to hasten the ousting of this regime and work towards ensuring that the next regime is better, that there is qualitative change. But most important, that there needs to be smooth change, because we have seen what happens when change comes in a disruptive way. People pay a price. We have seen it from history. So we need all to be aware of that and really hopefully all work to ensure that there is a smooth change. And those who go in, hopefully they'll have the capacity to start carrying out reforms and the corrective actions to ensure that the country can be broken out of that vicious cycle. which has affected us for the last 60 years. That's what I noticed in regard to that.
Yes, thank you very much, General. I think you've given a very comprehensive response to my question, but two things really stood out for me as we enter our third subtopic is you suggesting that we've had a history of cause. I think when you went through our history is mad with cause. The fact that the only transitions we know are either coups or violent takeovers, that someone has to lose their life before a new government comes into power. But also you go ahead to suggest that we've not yet left that cycle, that when you look at the things that are happening in our nation, we may not really have had some kind of leave of our past will. That brings me to the Kenyan question, because I feel like I believe that most of us feel like Kenya has received that kind of redemption from their past. In 2007, Kenya was led into a violent turn of events after an election. And ever since then, they've had a number of elections that have ended with no violence, a number of elections that have led into a transition that led into Uhuru Kenyatta and now has led into the leadership of William Ruto later on when he swears in. So it can be argued with a lot of ease, at least from the plain look of things, that Kenya has received that kind of redemption, that for them, they are on a clear sweep. This year's election was a little bit more interesting because of two things, really. One, it put a former prime minister against a vice president. And this is in a very current, in recent history, not like way back then. And then secondly, you had an election that has been lauded and applauded by a number of observers around the world for being a clean election. Something we've never, I think, had in Uganda, that we've had a number of observers looking at the election and saying, this election has been clean. Jeno, my question is simple to you. When you look at the Kenyan story, and specifically this last election, should we say that Kenya is a success story that Uganda needs to copy? Should we say that what has happened in Kenya is what we should be aspiring for in terms of transition, in terms of how to organize an election, in terms of transparency, in terms of a number of things? Should we say that Kenya becomes our aspiration as Uganda and as a nation?
Basically, any honest political actor, whether in Kenya or outside Kenya, needs to salute the electoral exercise of Kenya from the perspective that they have made significant advances. It's not the best. Basically, it's not the best, but at least they have applied effort. They have had some of the elections whose outcomes were not, quite good. I was part of the East African Legislative Assembly team that went to Kenya in 2007 when there were killings in the western part of Kenya, in the Rift Valley. People were burnt in churches. There was chaos, basically, because of a contested outcome of an election. And there had been an attempt of a coup in '82, which was suppressed. There have been so many assassinations in Kenya, political assassinations, since 1960. More than 10 prominent people, possibly, or around that number, who were killed. But that they applied effort and they were consistent in ensuring that they keep moving in a positive direction is something that needs to be applauded. And I think that is this last election symbolizes the success in that effort in two ways. One, that the conduct of the election itself was smooth until the end. One, the regime itself did not interfere in deploying forces to go and interfere with the electoral exercise. So we need to applaud the Uhuru regime, much as they had a candidate whom they were supporting. They didn't use police to disperse crowds, and all that. Two, until the day of the election, there wasn't any major incident that one could talk of that was disruptive in nature. Then the day of election itself was quiet. There wasn't any violence. There wasn't anything. We need to commend them for that development. 3, the voting at the end, when it came to the tallying process, controversy emerged. The tallying and the declaration of the presidential results. Controversy emerged because there was contention by Azimio. Again, we have to applaud them because for the following, I think it was 5 or 7 days, much as there was tension over the country, they kept calm. After the announced results was contested by Azimio in courts. That's another achievement, that they did not break out into riots. The tension was quite deep. And that they all trusted their judicial system. And there was open court. The people were following the arguments which were conducted. And eventually, judgment was made. And in this regard, of course, Ruto or Kwanza accepted the results, naturally. Now, Azimio accepted the verdict, though they disagree with its nature. I think that's simply something political, but they didn't oppose it, which is also a significant advance. So they are building a new culture, in short, a culture of adhering to the laws of the land. And eventually, once they continue on that path, they also develop a culture of constitutionalism, a culture of accepting the laws, laws and regulations on the basis of which their society is run. That's a significant advance in regard to Kenya. And one hopes that in Uganda, we keep focused on that. We keep struggling because Kenya didn't, it wasn't a tea party for them to reach where they have reached. It was a struggle. People died in Nyayo House. People were incarcerated. And they kept at it. They didn't give up. They kept on fighting. Went through the court systems, went through political organization and networking and influence. And you can see where they have reached. And therefore, those are lessons we need to learn. That we will not just simply get what we desire on a silver platter, that we must keep struggling. That we need to learn lessons from Kenya, from Ghana is another example. It's far from us, but they have made significant advances. And they also went through tough terrain, struggling for to reach where they have reached. So in Uganda, these are positive lessons to learn from. And we need to keep struggling and organizing. Frustration is not an option. And that's one thing that is worrying, to hear people who are frustrated and almost giving up. Giving up is not an option. There's nothing good is going to happen, to be given to us on a silver platter, or that is going to fall like rain. Nothing like that ever happens. All good things are fought for.
Yes, General, I want to pick up on something that you had said earlier on, and that is around the fact that the regime did not act in any way towards the election, that they sat on the fence even when they had a candidate in the election. My question is, don't you think that was because of the nature of the opposition they had, that the opposition candidate himself was a member of the state in a way that he's vice president, so he has his own resources and also has some kind of attachment to the state itself. So it becomes very hard for the state to fight itself. And I'll add something to that also. Don't you think then that there's a weakness in our opposition for us to be able to achieve that? Because if you had a strong opposition like they did, where you have two members fighting each other and they're almost at the same level in terms of financial muscle, political muscle, but also in terms of how they can manipulate political endeavors and political systems. So don't you think if you had the same within our state, and I think you and I were talking about a conversion that one of the members of DP was trying to make, that our opposition is weak. So don't you think that if our opposition was strong, quote unquote, as the one in Kenya, then we'll be able to also repel state and state influence and a number of things that they try to do in determining election results and election processes.
Two things or two comments I would like to make in regard to that. One, that no conditions are similar, ever. The Kenyan situation is not, you cannot make comparison. It has got its own dynamics. And where they are at has been a progression. The dynamics have led them to be where they are at. Two, that when a regime is run by people who don't care about processes, who don't care about the rule of law, they wouldn't care even if the other person is within the power structures. I mean, Kenyatta could have attempted to throw him out. He could have used the irregular out of unorthodox means, because people who act like that never care about the outcomes, even if they are disruptions. So for them to continue acting in a civil way, continue to act, you know, in following the law, shows that they have developed, at least on all sides. And we pray for them that they continue in that direction. Here, the dynamics are completely different. The nature of how politics in Kenya is conducted is completely different from here. In Kenya, for example, you have got ethnic, more or less, alliances, which have been active in the past, which one hopes in this last election, because that was broken in a sense, and one hopes they continue moving in that direction. Because ethnicity built on ethnic alliances is not healthy. It can benefit the political elite, but the peasants will continue having a raw deal. Because most times when you have got politics which is based on ethnic constituencies, the political elite leading the different blocks will become like power brokers. They will look for ways of inclusion to be on the gravy train, and most times the people on the lower ranks of such structures will have bear the burden you find them impoverished. You'll find that they do not necessarily get access to resources. But when you find politics which is based on national interest, on citizen interest, like in this particular direction they are heading, if they sustain that, then you can have strong parties. Yes, in Uganda we haven't had strong parties either. That's why we must keep focused on building that. I think the healthiest condition is where you find democratic practices, good governance practices, and healthy organized parties competing on platforms, varying on policy differences, and then people make their own choices. We have not reached there yet. Our politics is different. We first took power by force of arms. Kenya, it has never happened. Their processes have been political, much as at times they have had the military intervene. It tried to intervene in 82, it was repulsed. Here, we took power by force of arms. And if you look at all countries on this continent where there was a take of power by force of arms, the manner in which reforms have evolved is completely different. Resistance from those who would have taken power by force of arms, because you find fusion between the political actors and the military operators, and at times they are the same. But when they lack a team of them who are reformists and who ensure that they put their weight and effort behind conducting reforms that establish firm foundations for good governance, the battle for reforms is more intense. There's that difference between here and in Kenya. Nevertheless, it can't stop those who want the reforms to keep organizing and keep building. And that's what we need to do here in Uganda. Build strong parties, which are grassroots based, but also to recruit more and more people who want to do what is right when they're in power. People won't be looking at power as an end in itself. Could be looking at power as a means of using national resources for advancing the interests of the people. I think that's why I notice a difference between ourselves here and Kenya. Nevertheless, there are a lot of lessons that we need to learn from Kenya.
Okay, so General, our time is almost fast spent. So one, I'll ask the audience in case you have a question, either put it in our text space or just reach out, and we'll have like 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll be from the audience, and we'll be able to get done. As the questions come to General, my last question is around the organization of the party, because you suggest that we need to continue to organize as political parties. Now, of late, the Alliance has had a couple of meetings with religious leaders. And one, I would love you to just tell us what exactly is the intention behind having those meetings. 2, I think our history has a number of religious actors helping in advancing either political agenda or justice itself, from Janan Luwum, then to the Catholic priest that shielded Kabaka Mutesa back then when he was going to exile. And then we also had a number of political contestations that surround religious bodies. So one, what is the plan? Why are we reaching out to religious leaders? But 2, what is the place of religion in governance and in society? And finally, aren't you then driving us back to the place where we had a marriage between the state and the church or the mosque? And some people have argued that having a state religion, having such things really can be counterproductive for a society that is divided upon different religions and different things, and even some people who do not believe at all. So what is the drive towards that end that the Alliance is taking?
We have been conducting a tour, and the current activities been conducting were in regard to visiting the faith institutions. But the tour is going to continue because it's not only restricted to the faith institutions. Actually, before we met with the faith institutions, we met with the cultural institution. Only that the one which is in the central area is one. So when we go up country, we are going to meet with other cultural leaders. Also have time to meet with the professional associations. So it is not something restricted only to the faith institutions. Maybe the interpretation of that is because that's where we currently are going. But specifically with the faith institutions, we recognize that the human being, the individual, the citizen, is a common factor. The government or in politics, or politics is conducted around that human being in terms of provision of services, health, education, create environment for this individual to do business or to engage in whatever endeavor they are engaged in. Now, the churches and the mosques also work around this individual to prepare them spiritually for life after death. But in many instances, they also engage in provision of things which help this individual, which are non-spiritual. A significant number of these faith institutions are involved in education. They're involved in health. A number of them run hospitals, a number of them run schools, a number of them are now engaged in business. So there are areas where there is an intersection between faith institutions, and government. So why we are moving around is for them to understand who we are, where we are coming from, and where we think we are moving, and where we would intend to take the country, for them to understand us as political actors. Two, for them to recognize that we fully understand their role in developing the sheep whom they lead, or the laity, in not only in spiritual terms, but also in physical terms. And therefore, in areas where there is an intersection, that there would be need for supportive roles. The government, for example, can support education, can support health institutions, which are under the faith institutions. Once government determines that to be a correct way of moving. And I think even currently there is that collaboration. I think there's money which is put in the hospitals and in the education institutions which are run by faith institutions. But also, two, to ensure that they are leaders in their own right. They cannot be involved in politics, all right, in partisan politics, that would be incorrect. But there must be space in which they are listened to by any government. Being listened to, and them, whatever they are raising that affects their laity, when government is doing what, in any case, they benefit. Because if there is a prosperous country, the tithes and the zakah and donations become more. You know. Two, when they do their work right in terms of in educational institutions, in terms of preaching for strength of morals, in terms of ethics, to build the character of the people who are in mosques, in churches, so that when they are running whatever departments of government, that they know that they need to be honest, that they need to be fair. If they are in the courts and they are magistrates or they are judges, that they need to be just. That's another area where there is an intersection, because they are involved in the role of education. They are all involved in the role of building character in the laity. The regime also has a responsibility over that. I don't see, for example, any group which takes power next, if it doesn't see the critical nature of working with cultural institutions, working with faith institutions, working with professional bodies in the change of mindsets of the population. Because mindset change, it requires coordinated actions from all different actors. Because as we speak, corruption is not only practiced by those who are in government positions. It is in many, many areas. So it's a disease within society. So how do you carry out an aggressive effort to change mindsets in society unless all actors who are critical, who are influential, are on board? That's one of the areas where we open up and we speak about these issues. They are out there in the open. Everybody is crying about corruption. It's a disease. Its treatment is going to come from effort from all sides. And therefore, it is in that regard that we are conducting the tours that we are conducting. We are about to complete our tours of the faith institutions. I think we are remaining with about 3 or 4. And thereafter, we will continue and complete the tour of the cultural institutions. And then also continue conducting tours with the professional associations and other influential groups to discuss these issues that affect us as a people, and all of us to understand the critical role that we need to play in building a new culture. Because in as far as Alliance for National Transformation is concerned, our effort in trying to hasten regime change is also twinned with effort in building a new culture, because it wouldn't make sense when this regime exits and any player who goes in continues in the same direction. New faces, but same culture. Of nepotism, of discrimination, of injustices, of corruption. Wouldn't make sense. Yes, Emmanuel.
Yeah, Lord. Yes, General. There seems to be a person who has a question that we are trying to get on. I think to Gume, we're trying to get on to him so that he can ask his question. Just give us a minute. But I think you have given a very good account on what exactly the party is doing at the moment in regards to our outreaches to the different places. I think Tugume's network has really failed us, but I just want you to, because that time is fast spent and we have like 2 minutes to go. I just want you to just do 2 things for me, General. That's if no question comes to one. Is what is your message to the Ugandans in the diaspora abroad, those that have a heart for their country, those that think about the things that are happening in Uganda? What exactly is your message to them as we try to conclude our space?
Is the tendency of people who are in foreign lands
because of what would be happening in their home areas. When the countries from which they come are doing things right, they're on the right track. 2, they can benefit in terms of, because again, the tendency has been resources or remittances from the diaspora are significant. Here, I think it is now the first or the second largest. So the environment at home would be, if once it is stable, the investments would give them good returns on their investments. That's one. But 2, also to feel proud when you're in Europe, when you're in America, and you hear good things being said about the country where you come from. So for those who are still plugged in home politics, my advice, I keep giving it, look at the parties that you believe in. Those who believe in NUP, those who believe in FDC, JEMA, those who believe in NT, organize, because there are more opportunities. There are those who can afford to raise $10, $20 per month. If there are a number, 10,000, 20,000 that can support a party, that's significant. Because the parties need to organize themselves now. The tendency is that people raise money during elections. Elections is too late. If you want parties which are well organized and that would have the capability, once they take power, to turn around this deep negative culture that has caused the rot that we are in, the parties must be well organized. And therefore they need money now. To me, I keep talking about this, not only to the diaspora, as I'm doing now, but also to the domestic audience. We need to support parties. Parties are the vehicles of governance. There's no way this country is going to be moved in the correct direction, because parties which are vehicles of governance are the ones that manage state affairs. So the future is going to look like the manner in which the politics is now. If there is any party where you find that the dominant force is of those who look at power as an end in itself, that's how the future is going to look like. If the dominant force in a party is of people who are focused, who are disciplined, who subscribe to the establishment of foundations for building systems of justice, of accountability, of equality before the law, of fairness, that's how the future is going to look like. So investments for the salvation of the country must be in the parties, because the parties are the vehicles of governance. We need to understand that. The manner in which parties are going to be is the manner in which they will govern. If there are people in a party who don't believe in transparency and they're the dominant force, don't think that the moment they're in power that they are necessarily going to turn around overnight. It's not possible. The time has been now. They have to be supported, all these parties, by the people who believe in them, so that they can have the opportunity to shape the future in the manner in which we desire it to be. Yes, Emmanuel.
Yes, General. It seems like you preempted my final question, which was about how, what is your party, what is your message to the Ugandans who are within Uganda, who want to use their skills, who want to use their funds, who want to use their possessions to impact governance and change in a way. And I think in a way you hit it on that. But you can still say something about it in closing, because I'm just requesting you to just give us your final remarks, but also in case you want to direct anything to the general public, those that want to invest in change, how can they get involved in that?
Option. Getting frustrated is never an option. There is no dark cloud which has no silver lining. Even in the worst of conditions, there is always a silver lining. I need to hang on to that and keep applying our effort in supporting, again, parties. People who are involved in parties are the ones who are going to manage power in this country. People like it or they don't like it unless we change the constitution. So don't get frustrated even about what is happening in the parties themselves. Keep exerting effort. It is like people who are involved in business. It's not that they succeed, all of them, at a go, at the first attempt. People can try business, it fails, it starts again. At times people succeed on the second, third, fourth time. Even people who are in agriculture, at times there are dry seasons. At times the crops are eaten up by pests. But they don't give up. They continue until there's success. It's the same mindset that we must apply in politics. Don't look at weaknesses in politics, for example, now in the opposition, and you simply give up. Because when you give up, what other options do you have? It means you have assigned yourself to chance. You're hoping that something good will happen. I mean, anybody who has ever gone to school, anybody needs to know that there's nothing good that can happen unless it is an outcome of consistent, focused, conscious actions. That's what we need to do. And therefore, again, more and more people need to seek out the parties that they do believe in. They don't have to go in the open and become politicians, but there are many ways in which they can support those parties in terms of policy formulation, in terms of maybe in their communication strategy, in terms of resource mobilization and funding. If we want to shape the future to become the way we need it to be, apply effort ceaselessly, continuously, without let up. Don't give up. I mean, if you give up, whom do you think is going to come and fix these problems? So I'd like to thank you, Emmanuel, for accepting to host me, and thank all people in the audience for sacrificing your time to be part of this conversation. And may God bless you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, General, for the conversation. It has really been a very nice conversation. I'm sure we have all learned quite a lot, and I think you've inspired us to really do more for this nation, and also for the change that we want to see in this nation. Ladies and gentlemen, this conversations happen every month, so we will invite you for the next one that will be happening in the month to come. But also would like to encourage you to go through our social media platforms. We have a lot in there that you can pick up on. But also we request you that in case you have anything you want to ask, our DMs are always open for conversation. But also if you want to become a member, still the same, can do reach out to us, and we'll be able to lead you in. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience, and have a good night.